So there's a great deal of efficiencies and, teamwork and workflow that if sterile processing is working at a high level, that you can take that out of the system, which makes it more attractive for surgeons to bring their patients.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go Beyond Clean.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Ben Brodersen, the president of Novant Health Ballantyne Medical Center. And we're going to be talking about investing in instrument safety, obviously, as the theme. But we're going to talk about Ben's journey from a sterile processing technician all the way through the ranks, all the way up to running an entire hospital there in North Carolina. And I think this is going to be a conversation, Bobby, that's no matter what your career goals are outside of sterile processing, I think there's going to be a lot to glean from this in the categories of leadership and culture and training, etc.
I think so too, Hank. Ben is somebody who's been very important both to you and I, and something that's always impressed us about him is just that drive to keep moving forward, that drive for growth. And so this will be a very unique episode as we talk about building some leadership skills in sterile processing, and in particular, how that relates to providing safe quality care in our sterile processing departments.
All right. Well, we'll be right back with Ben Brodersen, El Presidente, Novant Health Ballantyne Medical Center, after a short break. Hang with us.
I'm Justin Poole.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Joining us today on this episode of Beyond Clean is Ben Brodersen, president of Novant Health Ballantyne Medical Center. Ben, thank you for coming on the show today.
It is my pleasure, Hank. It's good to be talking with you, just like old times.
Yeah, so we're going to get into the old times, I think, once or twice in this interview. Start us off on just an overview on what it is you're responsible for today as a hospital president, and then also some background kind of on your other administrative experiences along the way before you got to this role.
Sure. So now I am entering my 8th week with Novant Health, and I feel very fortunate to be in a culture where there's a lot of matrixed support. I didn't fully understand what a true matrixed environment was before I got to Novant. I've worked for HCA Healthcare in the past and CHF Healthcare and other organizations, and I always understood that there was a corporate presence and there was a local boots on the ground presence, and I've always had a lot of interaction between those two. But Novant Health is a little bit different. Again, that highly matrixed environment. So at the end of the day, to answer your question, I'm responsible for everything that goes on at Novant Health Ballantyne Medical Center at the end of the day. But I have a lot of support from a lot of different partners, whether it's OR directors from the system level, or whether it is quality and safety, regulatory, accreditation, et cetera, et cetera. I'm surrounded by a wealth of talent and support. So that's my role now, is build the hospital and get it open June 2023. And then from there, hopefully provide excellent and remarkable care to the community.
Now, you kind of highlighted that term matrix support, and that's the first time that I've encountered that term, but it seems like it's a pretty big deal for the impact that it's having on your ability to lead well and to build a team. So can you just spend a couple of moments to explain what that is?
Yeah. So technically speaking, there aren't very many people in the hospital that we're hiring and building that will straight line report to me. I'll give you an example. There is a system OR director who manages OR managers at each of the 5 facilities that are currently in this particular market. And that OR manager has a straight line, direct report relationship with that system OR director. And then they have a dotted line to me. Now, we all say that, again, at the end of the day, it's sort of my team, my hospital. And I say the word my, not in terms of ownership, but accountability. I'm accountable. But the direct line reporting relationship and a lot of the support in terms of, the day-to-day operations, the technical stuff really lies between the OR manager and the OR director in that case. And the same thing for case management or all the different disciplines, which allows me in my position to really focus on, my job proper in order to be, build relationships with physicians, the community, be an advocate for the patients of that area, et cetera, and the operational stuff happens all along the way with a ton of support from other people. So unlike other organizations where it's just corporate and local, that tends to leave people like the CNO and the COO and the CEO much more operationally involved. This is a little bit different. And I find that when it works well, it relies on collaboration and partnership, which is great.
So, Ben, take us back to the very beginning of your healthcare career and, how you got started in the hospital setting, maybe why you got started. And from there, we'll have a bunch of, follow-up questions. But primarily, we're interested in how to get started in sterile processing. What was that like for you?
Sure. Well, at the time, my first career was actually vocational ministry. And my wife and I lived outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia in the Ashburn-Sterling area. And I was an associate pastor there at Heritage Baptist Church. And along the way, we just figured, I really needed to augment my education with respect to ministry. And so we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and I began pursuing my Master of Divinity degree. While I was there, I somewhat selfishly chose to get a job in sterile processing in a hospital, partially because there are chaplains in hospitals, and I knew that they would help me reimburse the degree that I was pursuing. So I was a tad selfish, but also I wanted to be in a professional environment and still do a job that was helping people. I mean, obviously my calling in life is to impact other people's lives and to benefit them. So it also aligned with my overall kind of vision for life. So along the way, that happened to work well for me. I could go to school during the day, and then I worked the swing shift from 3 to 11 in the evening. And that's how I got started in sterile processing.
Yeah. So, Ben, what do you remember most about those early days in sterile processing? What was that like for you making that transition?
Sure. Well, at first I was just grateful to have a job. I had spent some of my life doing survey work for a site clearing company. And I remember being in Virginia in the winter pounding steaks when it was like -4. So I was really grateful to just be inside in a temperature controlled environment. But quickly, working in sterile processing, I became very impressed and a little bit kind of overwhelmed with the technicality of the job and the pace of the job and the importance of the job. I didn't anticipate that. I thought this is an entry-level job. I don't really need any previous education. And that was my conceptualization of the job walking into it. Very quickly, I realized that it was a lot larger than that. And then as I began to really understand the skill set that it took, then suddenly I was like, wait a minute, this is different than I thought. And I began to really look at leadership within the department and the technical components of the department, the efficiencies, the process flow. And, again, it just dawned on me that, wow, this is a really much more complex creature, and it's a much more important creature than I originally anticipated. The good thing is I had a great boss, and, maybe we'll get into this a little bit more later, but Karen Owens, who I'm sure you've referenced on this podcast before and probably had her on as well, once or twice. I had the privilege of working for her, which really shaped my understanding of what sterile processing is, how important it was to the hospital, and also simultaneously how undervalued it was at the time. And so she really helped me begin to manage or negotiate kind of my misunderstandings of what was going on there. And she gave me a great education. So that was really my first foray into, sterile processing and beginning to understand the scope.
Yeah, and your story is not unlike many that we've heard of people who either didn't know what sterile processing was and couldn't spell OR when they first stepped in the doors and then came to love it and be surprised by everything that goes on in that department. I'm curious to hear, and I imagine when you were developing that love for sterile processing, you had kind of one picture of what administration looked like, what it did, what kind of support it gave to sterile processing, and I imagine that has shaped over the years as now you're in that role of administration. Can you describe kind of that change in perspective of what hospital administration is and maybe what it does?
Sure. Man, that's a complex answer that'll probably take a few minutes to flesh out. At first, admittedly, and to no one's fault, administration wasn't a thing I even thought about when I was in sterile processing. I didn't really see those people. And the process of getting approvals for capital or productivity for your employee base, those sorts of things were a few levels removed from me. And I think that is, one thing that we as sterile processing technicians and me now as an administrator, that's something that kind of needs to change. It's very easy because sterile processing is behind the red line and you have to scrub out. And you have to really know where you're going and where you should and shouldn't be. And that creates an automatic barrier for administration to really understand and feel and touch and smell what's going on in sterile processing. So that's one thing that I would note, is that kind of natural barrier right there. In terms of now sort of what I know about administration, I would say that the biggest key is to have a leader in place that's willing to bridge that gap, to be able to make relationships with the OR director, with your patient safety quality team, and then ultimately your operators, your vice president of operations, your COO, and even your CEO. Those people need to have a true understanding of what's going on down there. Also, your chief of surgery, your head of anesthesia. The more you can have relationships in place with those people from a good representative of your department, whether that's a manager or director, a supervisor, whoever it is, partnering with your OR director, OR manager, whatever level that is, and then combining yourself with like an OR advisory committee, being a part of that, meeting with surgeons that are key to the whole thing. Relationships. It really is just like any other business in life. Building relationships and getting to know people, even on a personal level, is very, very helpful in terms of if, I want to ask for a new sonic machine to help me with the Da Vinci instruments, whatever it may be. Before you make that ask, those relationships need to be intact. And I can't stress enough how important that is.
Are you saying, Ben, that hospital presidents are like real people?
Well, I sure hope so, or else I need to like plug in or get recharged or something. But I am not an android nor a robot. So yes, we are real people. And, I will say, so I started out boots on the ground, a sterile processing tech 1 on the swing shift. And I moved up into, management. And from management, I moved into corporate consulting, basically. Just a little small note for those people who are wanting to develop their careers. I got Lean Six Sigma training, so that helped me eventually land a job working for HCA in their West Florida division for performance improvement for surgical services, because, along the way you pick up how much efficiency matters to sterile processing and ultimately to the OR and ultimately to the surgeon. And that pathway right there is hugely important to the facility. The ED is obviously the front door, and the floors are, the body of the facility. The OR is the heartbeat. That is your engine. And understanding how to make efficiencies and process flows work together is incredibly important. And it's a great learning ground for someone at the, sterile processing tech 1. If their eyes are open and you're paying attention, you will begin to learn those skills all along the way. And I would encourage everybody to go out and go ahead and get your green belt. Get your black belt if you want to. But that helped me get a job at that level of the corporate level. So I moved from the very boots on the ground operational level to a totally different perspective, working off of data sets and heat maps and graphs and trending data, and being able to go in and use performance improvement techniques to work on workflows, find inefficiencies, build teams. And so having that perspective shaped my understanding as well. And then I went back into the facilities at an operational level, at the executive level. And so I've kind of seen it from all three different levels, and being able to put that all together. At the end of the day, it's very complicated, and it's also a team sport. And so putting people into categories, I think, while I understand how we get into those categories, and you say, you guys are executives or administrators, and, we're the boots on the ground, or you're a consultant. All of those roles and all of those people. Exactly. See, yeah. And I know how that goes. But everybody has their part to play. And so again, I come back to that same theme of wherever you find yourself, building relationships on a personal level, building relationships that are effective in terms of accomplishing tasks and creating quality workflows. That's the secret sauce. And that's probably, you could probably take that statement right there and, put it into any career path. Good relationships, healthy working relationships, and being able to work in a team environment to bring improvement to whatever process you're talking about. That's what's ultimately going to benefit the surgeon who needs their time and their team and moving on, and the patient who needs a quality product and needs to be kept safe with a good outcome. That applies to everything. So being able to train your brain just to think that way all the time is incredibly important.
I know, Ben, that along the way in your journey, as you described, around the time, I guess, that you were a supervisor at that point, that's when I was hired on for my first sterile processing job. And then, of course, Bobby was hired on either when you were supervisor or manager, I think. And so both of us have had the same experiences that you described with Karen Owens, and just having a fantastic boss, that truly supported the individuals and the teams. And I know one of the things that I remember most about you is you were always very adamant about career growth and about, giving honest, transparent feedback into the best ways or the wrong ways as well to pursue growth and to kind of carve out your path. And as someone that has done that, from the front line of sterile processing, I think like most sterile processing technicians, listening to this today, like they're probably looking at themselves saying, there's no way that I could ever go from where I am today to running the entire facility. And you did it pretty quick. And so I'm kind of curious on that kind of career counseling perspective. I got a couple of questions I want to throw at you. You mentioned certification or training in like lean methodology, Six Sigma. What is really required, like hard tacks? Like what are the things credential-wise, education-wise that kind of open the door for you in this career progression for anybody who's listening that wants to go into that level of hospital administration? Like what do they need to do? What worked for you? What are your feedback on those things?
Yeah. Complex question again. So I would say, I don't know if you've ever seen the Apple commercial, but there's this guy on a couch and he's laying there in the prone position, kind of watching TV. And next thing you know, he sees a picture or another version of himself standing behind the couch. And they kind of look at each other, and one person's laying down, one person's standing. Then suddenly the guy becomes the standing guy, and he sees another version of himself walking through the house. I don't know if it was cleaning or what, but he was doing something else. Then he morphs into that guy, and all of a sudden he sees another version of himself jogging. And ultimately he becomes, runs a marathon or something. The lesson there is just start. You don't need to compare sterile processing tech 1 with the president of a hospital. If you do that, you are automatically creating a chasm it's unachievable. And so I would encourage everyone, just find the next thing that you can do right now. If that's, just getting certified, but just start it today. Don't wait for when it's going to become convenient or when you think you're going to have the time, or I need to work here 6 months before I do that. Get the book and get started right now. find out a way to go get lean skills. You can get those things online. They are available to you. They're not terribly expensive, and you don't need to hold out for, the program that is the highest, most esteemed program in the nation. Just get some skills and begin. So that would be my first advice to people is don't wait, start. I know that, on a personal side, my wife and I have been married. We lived in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different cities. I've gotten a couple of advanced degrees. She's gone back and gotten nursing school. We've had 4 kids along the way. And if we would have said to any of those things, whether it's having another child or getting another degree or moving to a new city, if we would have ever said to ourselves, well, okay, we're going to wait until things X, Y, and Z were done before we do that whatever next thing, I'd probably still be in Louisville, Kentucky to this day. Now, I don't know that. But again, the lesson is figure out a way. And it's going to be hard. I mean, you can imagine just by hearing me say, 4 kids, multiple degrees, moving from city to city. It's not been easy. And I'm not going to sit there and say that it was. But your willingness to really be aggressive and keep going, do the next thing, then, take out a loan, go get an MBA. You got to be willing to do that if you really want to achieve your dreams. And again, that probably goes beyond, healthcare or sterile processing. That's in any walk of life. So that willingness to start and that willingness to keep going is part and parcel to success.
I got to follow up on that degree thing because this is something that I know, like we've talked about, many years ago as well. But I see a lot of folks that are like, they got an eye toward administration. And so they think, hey, I need a master's degree in healthcare administration. That's going to be the golden ticket that's going to get me there. But then you mentioned like you got an MBA, and I think it was kind of focused in healthcare, if I remember correctly. Like, what are your thoughts on those two? Or like, does the type of degree really matter as much as that plan and that purpose that you described? Kind of walk us through that quickly.
I chose to get my MBA, and it did have a healthcare emphasis, but it was a little different than an MHA. I was told, and I sort of believe, that the MBA, if I wanted to pivot to a different career, an MBA applies to a broader scope of opportunities than does an MHA, which I believe, not having actually gone through the program like that, but I believe it's a little bit more heavily tailored to hospital administration. I got the MBA because I thought it would give me a little bit more flexibility should I choose to go through to a different career. Because I've had 3 different careers in my life, and I'm kind of sort of prepared if I needed to have a 4th or whatever. I appreciate that flexibility. That said, I would not say it's the golden ticket. I would say it is a ticket, and it allows you to qualify to interview for certain jobs, but it really boils down to relationships again. You're going to get jobs and you're going to be promoted and you're going to find yourself successful in moving up the food chain because you have performed well, of course. But you built relationships from people like a Karen Owens. I have had multiple bosses in my career path who have been encouraging and supportive and have, made that call to the next person up over here that would be, hey, check this guy out, or he's done a great job doing this. There's no substitute for that. It to an extent, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And MBAs and, having gone through the Master of Divinity program, those programs don't teach you everything there is to know. They teach you what there is to know, and they give you tools and techniques to be a lifelong learner and access more and more information as you get into whatever field you're in. But you don't walk out with an MBA saying, okay, I got it. Great. That, 2-year program just equipped me for everything. It's not like that. So I would say you kind of have to do it. Flexibility is good, and it's going to help you make relationships and contacts within fields. But again, it's not the end all. It's a tool.
Yeah, Ben, so as we pull this interview back around to our season topic related to instrument safety, I just want to comment on and ask, one of the perennial complaints and challenges in sterile processing is finding that C-level support, that administrative support, and particularly the financial investment needed in sterile processing. And so as you've gone through that journey, what kind of insights or best practices can you share with us that give folks the best chance possible of success in building those administrative relationships and ultimately getting the investment needed to do a good job in sterile processing?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, technically speaking, sterile processing is a cost center. That particular cost center is not generating money directly for the hospital. But what I would say is it's very easy to demonstrate how, as a support center, it is supporting, again, as I earlier mentioned, the heartbeat of the hospital, the engine of the hospital. Surgery does. It makes money for the hospital, and it provides, the margin for the mission, if you will, for the entire facility to a great degree. And being able to demonstrate how sterile processing directly helps that happen is not difficult, or it's not complicated, I would say. It's difficult, but it's easy to partner with your quality and safety team and say, look at our surgical site infections. If we had a bunch of those, especially if it's within the orthopedic service line and you get a spate of those, that is a death knell. And you can lose not only surgeries, but you can lose surgeons over that. Conversely, if your sterile processing department is aiding and doing their part to keep sterile surgical site infections down, surgeons rely on that. They want to go to places where they can point at it and say, this place, you're not going to get an infection here. And, just a mention, it takes a whole team, a whole village of people to work on that particular metric. But sterile processing is a key component. Beyond the quality and safety, you have efficiencies. Surgeons want to come in. They want to start their case on time. They want to move through it quickly. They don't want to be delayed by holes in wrappers or, the incubator wasn't working right. And so the BI failed and now we've got to wait and implants and blah, blah, blah. Like that becomes a giant headache, a source of great frustration, not only for the surgeon, it's unsafe for the patient. Now they're delayed. Their family's delayed. They're wondering why this is taking so long. The nurses, the scrub techs, they're frazzled trying to manage it upstairs or wherever it is. So there's a great deal of efficiencies and teamwork and workflow that if sterile processing is working at a high level, that you can take that out of the system, which makes it more attractive for surgeons to bring their patients. And so being in the ministry, I've always understood the church sound booth. And for those of you who have ever been out to churches, you always realize that behind you back there somewhere, there is cameramen and the sound booth guy that run the microphones and that sort of thing. And no one cares that they're there. That's not why you came. But as soon as that microphone doesn't work or it goes and screeches and I can't hear what's going on, now all of a sudden I'm turning around and looking. And I'm going to figure out who's back in that sound booth and,
who's messing up.
And it's really oddly disconcerting. If the PowerPoint presentation and the song doesn't match what I'm trying to sing and I can't see it, I'm looking around and I'm trying to figure out why is this a pain. It's like that in sterile processing. If everything runs smoothly, nobody talks about it. But as soon as there's a hole in the wrap and an implant case and I got a patient on the table and everything comes to a stop, that surgeon's going to the CEO here after a while. So before you get into that situation, I would, again, with quality leadership in your department, with those good relationships are built in, the more that you can bring administration and even other surgeons. Surgeons are happy to be a part of the conversation as long as it's collaborative.
Are they real people too, Ben?
They are real people too. Absolutely.
Are they real? Okay.
Yeah, they have kids.
Wow.
Yeah, families.
Families too?
Yeah, they're nice people.
I always thought they were like robots. Angry robots is kind of what I thought.
I understand that sometimes, again, if you're looking at the bad incidents, you can build that reputation. But the truth is if you can get great collaboration from your surgeon partners, from your chief of surgery, from your head of anesthesia, they know how important it is. And they know the difference between a hospital that can do it right and a hospital that won't. And they will choose to go to a hospital that can do it right. And that's business, and that is ROI, and that does get you capital. And so being able to demonstrate that not only narratively and relationally, but also, there you can start, and this is another tip for people in sterile processing. Learn to do your spreadsheets, learn to track data, learn to use graphs and show, the amount of productivity that's happening and the time that it takes for each tray to be produced. And if I ramp that up too hard, look what happens to my surgical site infections or holes in wraps or inefficiencies downstream, and use that as a tool to begin to build your skills of data analysis, data collection, use of Excel, advanced use of Excel. Those are all things that are just sitting there waiting to happen. And unfortunately, again, because sterile processing tends to be looked at as a quote entry-level job, people don't think like that. But it's, as you know, it's an exceedingly complicated job. It's very technical. It's very intellectual. And you can turn it into that very easily, as long as you have people who are willing to put in a little bit of extra oomph, maybe some time off of work on a Saturday, learn a new software platform, whatever. It is there for the taking. And, again, I'm living proof of being able to start there and utilize that opportunity to begin to develop higher level skills, as long as you're willing to start.
I think that comment, even about the Excel skills, is so important, because that's not taught in our curriculum. That's not in our certification program. That is something, like you said, you're going to have to go out of your way to find. But the value and the tools that provide you for communicating to your surgeons, as you mentioned, and just making the case for data, even if it's making the case to supply chain, and you bring your own data, like, hey guys, do you realize that we're spending this much money, or that we could save this much money? That's really, really powerful. But it goes back to what you said earlier of, it's got to be based on relationships, but you also have to work hard. Because if you're not doing the work, it doesn't matter how good the relationships are. They're not going to vouch for you, because they know, like, I'm not going to tie my name to that person, because they're down there, just kind of on a halfway. Yeah.
Even further beyond that, I would add that it is incumbent upon a sterile processing leader to instill those sorts of skills specifically to generate a sense of pride and respect for your own department. It's easy to, again, be that entry-level employee mentality, but if you are building your people and demonstrating to them, like, look what the impacts of your job is, and let me teach you and give you different skills, and all of a sudden people become a little bit more proud about the work that they're doing. They value the work that they're doing. They value that you're investing them in them in terms of career building. That pride becomes contagious. And you can even see, just in the three of us sitting here talking, and I know if we put Karen on, the pride of respecting sterile processing and the people that work there and the building of those skills builds out a leadership tree that branches off into all kinds of different directions. You guys have your own business. You're doing podcasting. I'm an executive administrator. Karen's moved on to different parts of her career. It just generates that.
Yeah, the power of a leader to have that ripple effect of, the word I was thinking kind of along this interview is just confidence. And the fact that you can get a new technician, you can get a young leader, and you can instill that confidence that you can grow. And that doesn't mean outside of the department. It just means in your own professional skill set, your own technical knowledge, your own cultural knowledge. And then from there, all kinds of opportunities can open up, as you've been describing. So as we move to a close here, I do want to ask you, like, one more, like, you've already laid out a bunch of practical takeaways, I think, in the last couple of minutes, but is there anything else that, folks tuning in today, if they want to go back to their department tomorrow, or they just want to go home and think about their own career, is there anything tangible that you would want them to leave from this conversation thinking about or doing with their teams or with themselves?
Yeah, one, I would say ownership is incredibly key. Building a career, building a department, taking care of patients, contributing to your facility, to the community. There's no substitute for ownership. You have to be willing to be the one to make it happen. And that kind of goes hand in hand with my earlier comments of just start. Those two things put together is what differentiates a lot of successful people or successful businesses or safe facilities or community involvement, whatever it may be. You got to own it, and you got to just start. And so I would say that is numero uno, 1A, 1B. 2, I would say, make sure that your leadership, go to your leadership, push them a little bit. Maybe they aren't thinking like this. Maybe you are. Ask them for ways where you can learn more things. I think that most leaders would respect that and provide that pathway for people to do that. And then third, I would say you have to go back and create the emotional, financial, and personal capital in your own life to be able to take on extra projects. There's no way that I could have done, my wife and I, my family could have done what we would have done if we were making if we treated our job like our job, and once we were done doing our job, then our personal life was, just recreation and relaxation, or just kind of the norm. You got to be willing to put in your own personal time on the outside to be able to get that next certification, get that next degree, move to that next city, figure out how to adapt to that next child, whatever it might be. Just building in the willingness to be, remember, we always used to say, be comfortable being uncomfortable. I am no longer frazzled or stressed out in that particular environment. I'm okay there, and I'm not waiting for the time when I am okay. I can't stress enough how much the ability to be calm under pressure, relaxed in stress, and that's a leadership quality too. The higher up you go and the more complex the system is that you are managing, the more heartburn that comes with it on a more regular basis. And if you don't have that skill set to stay calm in the moment, be able to kind of rise up and give an analysis of any particular situation and make good decisions in that sort of environment, that's, again, is a life skill. And so for those three things, I would say on a personal note, for every sterile processing tech, supervisor, manager, you are in that situation. And you have the ability to take advantage of all the things that we've said. If you spin it on a positive level, it's a whole bunch of opportunities. It's not just hard work. And as long as you think about it like that, then you'll be able to find success and be able to sort it out and figure out who those other people are who are like that, build those relationships, and then naturally opportunities come your way.
Well, Ben, I appreciate you taking your time on this episode to share your insights, your journey. On a personal level, I appreciate the time that you took when I was a young leader to kick me in the pants when I needed it, redirect at times, get some encouragement along the way, because just as you've been describing, like that's what a good leader does. And I think the story in all of our lives, out of that leadership tree that you mentioned with Karen Owens is a testimony to the true impact that ongoing succession of leaders who care about all the things that you're describing can have on a department, on individuals, on an entire industry. So it's been awesome to reconnect with you today. Looking forward to seeing where you continue to grow in your career. And I just want to thank you again for everything. Congrats again on your new role.
Appreciate it. I thank you both, Hank and Bobby. It's a pleasure for me to kind of recount where we've all come from and to see the success that all of us have had. So I really appreciate your invitation to talk about this, and be happy to talk more any other time.
And that was Ben Brodersen, the president of Novant Health Ballantyne Medical Center. And Bobby, wow, a lot of great insight, a lot of perspective there, a lot of personal connections, I know, with us. But I feel like on that relationship piece in particular, like really stood out to me as so important. And I know I was kind of kidding around about our administrators are real people, but it can be scary to bridge that gap, especially as a sterile processing technician, to see this suit and tie walking down the hallway and thinking, that's the president. That's the president. But, at the end of the day, like they are real people and they need to know who we are and what we're doing and what we need.
Yeah, and as I'm thinking back in my own sterile processing career and knowing the hospital administrators that I worked with, the idea that we often talk about of, building relationships with your administrators, it's something that's pretty hard to do, right? They don't have a whole lot of time. I'm thinking back to Ben's comments about the dotted lines that our leaders have to hospital administrators. So his advice about building some relationships that are a bit closer, particularly with quality, risk, infection prevention, who can help kind of build that narrative and the importance of your department at the administrative level, I think is going to be key for our leaders out there, and was a really great takeaway from Ben.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support our mission of Beyond Clean by subscribing to us on Apple, Amazon, Google Podcast, and I'm going to skip the others because no one uses them. You can also access our bonus content with it looks like a gift or a present on the Beyond Clean mobile app. So check it out. We're on Apple and Android devices for all you weird people out there. We would certainly appreciate a 5-star rating and a very positive review, because your feedback tells the whole world why it's worth listening to these conversations on Beyond Clean. If you've got any questions or would like to recommend a guest, even if it's yourself, to come onto the podcast, we'd love to hear from you at info@beyondclean.net. On behalf of Bobby Parker and myself, we want to thank you for listening to this week's edition of Beyond Clean.